Hello and welcome to this live stream, this Canon Live with me, Dave Newton, right here this afternoon on the Camera World Facebook page. Now, thank you all for tuning in. I'm going to find this video. I am going to make sure that we're live. So if we are indeed live, if someone could tell me, just say, hi Dave, I'm here, say hello, ask me a question, whatever it might be, you just fire up the comments right now. You let me know that we're live, and then I will be happy because all will be working. And I always like to find out if everything's working before I launch into what I'm going to say, because well, heaven forbid anyone would like to miss anything. Obviously, this is live. You can watch it again though, it will live there forevermore. So I'm just trying to find it live right now. It tells me that there are 23 of you live listening in. This is great news, thank you for joining us. Really, obviously the most important thing about this session is that we are talking about, let me show you this little beastie here. I have got an EOS R5, I have had it for a while. And I have been shooting with it probably about a week and a half. I've spent some time up in the, in fact I'll just leave that off, up in the Lake District, shooting landscapes. I've photographed my puppy. I'm going to show you those pictures. I've photographed insects, I've photographed some birds, all sorts of stuff. And I am going to tell you all about it. And assuming that I can actually find the video, which I apparently have done, there we go, there are some comments. Hello people, Ruth, hello Mary, hello Mark, Robert, Sasha, Vivian, Camera World guys, you're there as well. Fabulous, it's working, I'm happy. Okay, so first thing for me to say is feel free to ask me questions. You want to know something about the R5? I will do my best to give you the answer. If I don't have the answer, I will do my best to go find it and let you know in the comments afterwards. So you light up that comment section and we will go from there. Now, what I am going to talk to you about, as I say, is the camera. I'm going to talk to you about my experience of using it. I'm going to tell you what I like about it. I'll tell you some things that I don't like about it. I will tell you overall my thoughts on the camera. I will show you pictures. I have got a bundle of raw files. Excuse me, unlike most professional photographers, I will happily show you my raw files because that really is the only way you can judge the quality of a camera, is by actually seeing some raw files. And if you can't get the camera in your hands, then at least somebody showing you some raw files, even if you're only seeing them at 1080 or 720p, is better than nothing, right? So there we go. Right, now, that's straight off, David Portwain. Of course, we're all being regaled by the overheating reports. Of course you are. The internet loves a good scandal. The internet loves something hot, no pun intended, to get their teeth into. I will happily talk to you about that as well. So what am I going to say about the R5? Well, as I say, I've had it for about a week and a half. I've shot a whole variety of different things with it, and the long and short of it fundamentally is, I think for me and for the work that I do, it's the best camera I've ever used. Is it a perfect camera? No, I don't think it's a perfect camera. I don't think such a thing exists because everyone has different needs and nothing can be perfect for everybody. But is it the closest thing to perfect for me and for what I want to use it for? Absolutely, yes, it is. And that's across the board of all the cameras I've ever used. It's a lovely camera to hold. It feels really nice in the hand. Obviously, we can talk about the top line specs. So we've got the 45 megapixels resolution. I'm someone who, I shot on a 5DSR for a long time for landscape work because I loved that 50 megapixel resolution. So having 45 megapixels in a mirrorless form, that just makes me happy. We've got the 12 frame a second in mechanical shooting, 20 frame a second in electronic. So anytime I want to do any action, it's fast enough, and that ties in really nicely with the autofocus as well. So you've got the, and I'm not even going to pretend to remember how many AF points it is, 5,500 something AF points. a lot of them, basically most of the frame. AF points that work really, really quickly as well. So the AF actually tracks, and part of the AF system is the eye tracking, and the eye tracking not just for people but for animals as well. And even if you are more of a people photographer, and we will be talking portraits in a future session, so I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on that, but the AF system also will pick up the back of somebody's head. So if someone's two-faced, not a problem. Sorry, bad joke for this time in the evening. But if someone turns their head, you know, if you've got their face and they turn their head, the camera sticks on the back of their head as well and will track. So we've got the AF system. Then there's the image stabilization system, and for the first time really we have got a really good in-body stabilization. But it's not just in-body stabilization or in-camera stabilization, but we've also got the lens stabilization. And this is important in terms of how the two of them work together to give us that 8 stops or up to 8 stops of combined image stabilizer. And in my experience, it works. I have handheld a 100 to 400mm lens at 400mm, and I've shot it at, I think it was a 15th of a second or maybe a 30th of a second, and it was sharp, and it's facing into a strong wind. Okay, so the combination of image stabilization works really very, very well. And I've not even talked about the video stuff yet, and how useful and how good that is for a lot of the work that I do. Now, I am going to deal with, a question came in straight away. When you're in electronic sport, David, what was that question? It appeared and then disappeared. When you're in electronic shutter for sport or motion, does it distort the image? So the potential issue that you face with electronic shutter, I'll deal with this right now and get back to where I was. The potential issue you face with the electronic shutter is that you can get some kind of tearing or rolling shutter. Now, it depends on the subject, it depends how fast it's moving. I've not done any electronic shutter fast moving stuff yet, so I can't give you a definitive answer. My gut feel is something fairly fast moving, yes, you are likely to see some kind of distortion. But it will be something that you'll need to test, and how bad that distortion is or how much you're willing to accept it will be down to what you're trying to achieve and the pictures that you want. Obviously we always want perfectly clean pictures all of the time, but given that that's an impossibility, you know, you'll have to decide what is too much for you. It is something that I'm going to be testing over the next week or two while I've still got the camera, a few weeks while I've still got the camera. So hopefully if I've had chance to do some of that by the time I next get round to talking to you, which will be not next Tuesday, but is it Tuesday? Not next Tuesday, the Tuesday after, I think it is, where we do the portrait one. If I've had chance to test it, then I will give you a definitive answer, and I will even try and show you some pictures. Okay, so there we go. So that was that. Hopefully that answered your question, David. Now, next up, there's a lot of you saying hello, which is fantastic. Hello, all of you. Lend it to me. I wish I could lend it to you, David. Well, I don't really, because I don't want to let it out of my hands, to be honest. But you know, if I could lend it to you, no, I probably wouldn't, actually. Maybe you could come along and shoot alongside me and have a go with it briefly while you pry it out of my cold, dead fingers. So, I was about to talk about the video stuff as well. So, video stuff was, we've obviously got the 8K, 30 frame a second, 12-bit raw internal recording. And that is facilitated by memory cards like this. Let me try and find somewhere where you've got some reflection but not too much. That looks about right. So this is a CF Express card, and in fact it's a great time for me to say that it's dual card slots. So we've got SD and CF Express. Everyone slated the R because it didn't have dual card slots, which personally I never found was a problem, but I could understand why some people did. You wedding shooters who don't trust memory cards, I can understand why you potentially had a bit of an issue about this. It never particularly bothered me, but now you've got 2 cards, and what does the internet want to do? Complain that it's not 2 SD cards, but 1 SD card and 1 CF Express card. You simply can't please everybody all of the time, okay? And that's something I've come to realise over the years. I understand that CF Express cards are expensive. They are not the cheapest card out there, but they're incredibly fast. The technology is spectacular. To give you an example, replying to me there, Camera World. No, you were replying to other David as well. There we go. The SD card, this is about the fastest SD card you'll find. This is a 300 megabyte a second UHS 2 card. And if it looks a bit weird, I'm trying to look at the screen that shows me whether you can see it or not. Let me bring it here. There's some reflection. Anyway, there it is. So that's 300 megabytes a second. This is 1.2 gigabytes a second, or 1200 megabytes a second, okay? That's what enables that 8K raw 12-bit internal recording. Simply without this, it doesn't happen, okay? And what you may find, incidentally, as an aside, is when you're shooting video, if you switch to RAW and you don't have a CF Express card in there, it will make you shoot RAW and MP4, because it will only be able to save RAW to this, but it will save an MP4 to this. So you'll still be shooting even if you don't have the CF Express in there. So that's a bit of the video stuff. Now, what else is there? We're supposed to be talking about landscapes, and we seem to have talked about all sorts of things but landscapes right now, mostly because I'm pretty good at rambling. So, when we're talking about landscapes, the things from my perspective when I shoot landscapes that I'm most interested in are: how does the camera handle? What's its dynamic range like, particularly? And while I'm not a big fan of HDR, I guess I need to talk about the HDR capabilities of the camera as well, particularly with the HEIF format that's been included. First seen on the 1DX Mark III, now included into the R5 as well. So, what I'm going to do right now, you've looked at my ugly mug plenty long enough, so I'm going to show you some pictures. I hear a collective sigh of relief as you all cheer, yay, no more Dave's face, and I say, sorry, you're still going to have me in the corner. What can I say? There we go. So, let's actually look at the pictures now. These are raw files. Most of them are pretty much unedited as they go. And in fact, I will happily scroll through, and some of them I've marked, but I'll scroll my way through here. There's pictures of my puppy. Oh look, there's some pictures of Ashness Bridge. There's some. Oh, where did that go? Come back, Dave. Come back. There's some really contrasty, high dynamic range landscapes here, looking straight into the sun. It was a great test. Oh, there's some in-camera black and white. What else is there? Oh, there's some long lens stuff. There's some sunrisey stuff. There's some more dog stuff. I will happily let you see pretty much anything of this, whatever I can find quickly enough. But we'll start at the top to begin with, because, well, the top always seems like a pretty good place to start, right? So, do remember, fire away with your questions at any point. I will do my best to answer them. If there are any of these pictures that you'd particularly like to see, you just shout. I am going to show you, to begin with, though, we're going to start with this one. So this is Ashness Bridge. Now, from a landscape perspective, I'm actually going to put myself down here. There we go. Ooh. Jumping around the screen. So, this is Ashness Bridge in the Lake District, just down from Keswick. And when I'm shooting landscapes, I am a big filter fan. I use ND filters a lot. I've recently switched to using the H&Y filter system because I prefer it. I prefer the results. I love the way it works. I love the magnetic holder. And I think the glass quality is really good, and I love the little frame that you get around the edge and all of that. But that aside, this straight away is quite a challenging picture for a camera to capture. If you've ever tried photographing a waterfall or flowing water like this, you'll know that it's quite hard to try and maintain everything within the dynamic range that the camera can capture. Now, yes, your filters certainly help, but we still have an extended dynamic range here. We've got the bright highlights here of the rushing water where it goes to white and it picks up the light, and you end up with potentially blown highlights, specular highlights. And down here in areas like under here, under the bridge, you would expect that this would just block up to shadow because that dynamic range is massive. Now, yes, I did use an ND grad filter over the sky here to try and hold this sky down, but it didn't allow me to do anything to this area or this area. Yeah, so I still had to go with whatever contrast range the camera, or dynamic range the camera was able to capture between the area under the bridge and the area of the waterfall here. So the fact that that's been captured is remarkable. Now what I'm going to do, I am going to turn on, let me just show you this. I'm scrolling down here. This is the shadow and highlight alert, shadow highlight warning, and this is what I have it set to. So 3 and 253. So that's actually quite conservative settings. It means that any blown highlights or block shadows are going to appear very quickly. So I'm going to turn that on and we'll zoom back out. And now what should happen is if there were any blocked up shadows, we'd see them in blue. And if there were any blown highlights, we'd see them in red. Let me just explain, or let me just show you this. So I'm going to turn this up. There we go, bang. Turn the exposure up and we've got some flashing red highlights. If I turn it down, we now get lots of blocked blue dark areas, okay? So yes, I marginally underexposed this. I've opened it up by 1/3 of a stop, and it's fully contained. The point being that the dynamic range of the camera has been able to capture this scene in one. Now, what does 45 megapixels look like? Let me zoom in here. Try and give you a view of what this looks like. Now, what you got to remember is that well, 45 megapixels is a lot. I'm looking at this on Canon's Digital Photo Professional, which is a free bit of software, comes with the camera. It's a highly capable bit of raw viewing software. And I'm looking at it on a 16-inch MacBook Pro, fully spec'd, but these files are large. There's a lot of data in them, so it can take a little bit of time for you to navigate around pictures. So if it feels a little bit laggy, it's probably not the internet, though it might be. It's probably more just my computer chunking away through the data. So look, here's a section of the rock in the foreground. Maybe let's actually go to something with a bit more detail. How's about some grass somewhere? So you're seeing this full screen, but really that's not helping you. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom this up. So basically I'm zooming the screen in. Now on my screen that looks horribly pixelated because I've massively over zoomed it. But looking at what you're seeing, I'm hoping that that now looks, well, you can see all of the detail in there. Whereabouts did I focus? And how was it? So David, how did I meter this? I do everything manually. So I spot meter. But actually, if you're shooting landscapes, live view, really, really useful. And you can get a live histogram. So it makes it very simple to adjust your exposure to suit. And as a quick throwaway tip for you landscapists, go into live view. You've got your ND filters. Set your exposure for the shadows. Watch the histogram. Make sure that there's nothing touching the bottom edge. It's just slightly in from the left-hand edge, so you know that you've got detail in your shadows. Then you can either guess or count how many stops of adjustment you need to bring the sky down, to bring the brightest areas down, and then that's the ND grad that you're going to need to slot in place. That's how I work. I find live view with live histogram makes life so simple, so quick, and I don't understand why not everybody does it, because life is just a way easier. There was another question that came in which said, Greg, 45 megapixels does indeed take up a lot of memory. Absolutely, absolutely does. Who was that? Somebody said, Stephen, whereabouts did I focus? I focused, let me zoom out here. I focused on about this plane here. So it would have been kind of this rock here or this rock here. That would have been where my point of focus was. And this was shot on a 24mm tilt and shift lens. You can see that over here. We're on 24mm. You can even see my settings. So half a second, aperture of 16, ISO 100. And then these are pretty much the default settings that Canon applies. You can see that I've lifted the shadow by 1. If I bring that down, just so you've got the genuine nothing's been done to it look, apart from that bit of exposure, what you'll see is up here in the top corner, oh, there's some very dark bits of leaves in there where, oh, well, I mean, that's terrible, right? That little bit of blocked up shadow. But as you saw, just lifting the shadow area a tiny bit, just it disappears. Benefits of RAW. Okay, so that's a first image for landscapes. Oh, Dave. Do you know I have hot corners on my Mac? Anyone that has a Mac, they're brilliant. They're terrible when you're doing a live show and you keep running the camera into the hot corner, or the mouse, sorry, into the hot corner. Anyone want to shout what other image you'd like to see? Here, let's try this one, shall we? While you think about what you might like to see. Okay, shooting straight into the light. Again, I've used ND grad filters. This is something that would be incredibly challenging normally. You can see I've got the shadow highlight alert on. There is a little bit of a blown highlight just here, which is obviously where a sun ray is coming through the back of a cloud, and just here, which is pretty much where the sun was disappearing behind the hill in the distance. But everything else, all of the shadows are not blocked up. Now I have opened it up slightly because I did shoot it slightly darker. It looked a bit more like that, in which case there was a tiny bit of blocked up shadow here, but I caught a tiny bit of highlight there. So obviously the juggling point here is how much of a grad do you put on there, how much of a heavy line do you want over the hills in the distance. But fundamentally the dynamic range within the scene, within the camera, it is, as Canon say, in my opinion, it is I think about a stop better, or getting on for a stop better than a 5D Mark IV, which frankly is incredibly pleasing. It does make shooting silhouettes a little bit harder though. So here, let's just open this up a little bit. There we go. Okay, any other questions, anything else you'd like to see? No? Wow, Stephen Knowles, wow. Okay, so I don't know what you were wowing for. Is it this picture, Stephen? Is that what you were wowing for? If so, I don't know if you're wowing for my picture or the performance of the camera. Either way, thanks, I think. Okay. Oh, no, hit the button twice, Dave. So another little tip, by the way, any of you ever want to do any lives, when you have a big light shining in your face, it makes seeing the screen a little bit challenging. Okay, let me show you this one here. So this is, Stephen, the most unhelpful comment imaginable. Yes. I'm sure I gave you two options. Anyway, I'm joking. Don't worry about it. So let's look at this one. Now, I told you that the camera has got the HEIF format, which we first saw in the 1DX Mark III. Basically, it's an HDR format. It allows you to capture a higher dynamic range. Yes, we've still got the same HDR settings that we'd had in previous Canon cameras, but this goes a step further. So we actually get the ability to shoot in what you'd call HDR PQ. Okay. Now there are two competing, and I'm going to use the word standards advisedly because they can't both be standards. But we've got HLG and PQ, and it seems that PQ is kind of winning out. If you skip back in your memory banks, it's probably a bit like Betamax versus VHS. Both are very good. One of them is going to win over the other. So here is, and I'm going to zoom in here so that you can see that I'm not lying to you. So here is the CR3, but look at the file name. It's 055A4550. And here is the HIF, which is exactly the same. And even just looking at the thumbnail, you can straight away see the difference. Okay, so normally, as I say, I'd be using my my ND grad filters, but if you don't have ND grads with you, and in fact when I took this, I'd gone for a walk with some friends and the dog. I didn't carry a lot of kit with me. It was a camera and lens, and I just was going to snap whatever I saw. So picture on the left, the dynamic range in that picture is so great because the clouds are so bright that no matter how good the camera is, it's always going to struggle to hold all of that down. The picture on the right hand side is the HEIF format, or HIF as you see it here. That's the HDR PQ version, where it's given more dynamic range into the highlight areas. It's expanded the dynamic range of the camera and given us, I mean, if I open the two of them, I'm going to have to zoom out a second, sorry about that. Let's say I open them in Quick Check, where you can get a nice full screen view of them. There we go. So this is, trying to see which one which is. There we go. If I jump between them now, the challenge that you're seeing is that actually this is the as you can see, I don't know if you can see what this says, displayed as converted to SDR. So this is the RAW file, but it's been converted down as if it is the SDR version. So it's going to look very much the same. It's why actually looking at it in the thumbnail view is arguably easier to give you an idea of what's going on. But just look at the image, see it as a full screen, see the dynamic range. Now down here we would be expecting to see, you know, lots of dark shadows down in this dry stone wall, and in the front of this dry stone walled, frankly awesome little shepherd's hut. And we'd be expecting to see lots of blown highlights up here, up in the sky. But we've got fantastic expanded dynamic range through the file. Now, normally, if you're going to work in HDR, it's really useful having an HDR capable monitor. I can't really show you that. I'm using an ISO monitor because I'm an ISO ambassador. So I've got a CGI 319X or CG319X, which is an HDR, semi-HDR capable monitor. Unfortunately, I can't really translate that through to what you see, because if you're not looking in an HDR screen, it's going to mean nothing to you. But if you want to really make use of the HDR features of the R5, then having a separately connected, truly HDR screen would be useful, so you know exactly what you're looking at. Okay, let's come back out of here. Thanks for the example of the 24 TS. Andy, you went full frame mirrorless after the 5D2. I think I can probably guess where you went. So it's great to see Canon with a competitive model in the mirrorless. To tempt you back, I do hope we see you back on the light side or the right side of the photographic brand wars at some point soon. Oh, someone else has arrived. Will, hello Will. Now, if I remember rightly, Will is from Camera World Stevenage. So hello there, Will. Those of you that shop in the Stevenage store will know him, I think. That's if my memory is correct. There we go. Right, moving on. Any pictures that you guys want to see here? Anything that you would like me to show you? You please shout. I'll give you a couple of seconds of looking at this screen, and then you can try and give me a reference of where and what you may want to have a look at. In the meantime, well, I'm going to show you one of my favourites. So this is one of my favourite pictures, just because I can, really. So here we have got my puppy Otis. When it loads, there he is. So this is what used to be the beautiful old wooden style overlooking Windermere up on Loughrigg Fell. The wooden style is no longer there. It's replaced with the dry stone wall style. And I was actually all set up to shoot the sunset. My puppy's only 9 months old. He had never seen a style before. Didn't really know what one was. It took him a little while to get his head round it, but once he got his head round it, up and down he went, and then he stopped and wanted to look back to make sure that Mummy had seen him at the top of the style, and so I'd foreseen this happening and was ready to capture him. Anyway, I digress. I digress. Birds on the lake, Stephen says, and David Portwain says low light. Brilliant. I will give you those two next. And apparently I was right about Will. Go me. Go me. Right. So let's have a quick look at this. You know, there's not a massive dynamic range in here. I'm shooting with the light. But to give you an idea of what pictures look like out of the camera, you can see that I've brightened this up by less than a third of a stop. I've played with the clarity slider ever so slightly, which has just given it a bit of a lift. In terms of the shadows, I've opened the shadows up by 1 in here, and the sharpness is just whatever was set by default. And I was using, as you can see here, the landscape picture style. Now, nothing super exciting about this one. So, somebody said birds on the lake. That was the first one that I spotted. So let's go with this. Here we go. Birds on a lake. I'm assuming you meant this one, the geese. Whoever said that, it was Stephen Knowles. Stephen, you said birds on the lake. Greg, I haven't done any sports photography yet. I've done no sports, so I can't show you any of that. Does a running dog count as sports? I guess it's much the same thing. because you probably want to see what the not the image stabilization, what the AF looks like. So I'll tell you what, in a little bit I'll show you some of Otis running as well, and then I'm actually going to show you some of the camera menus too. Okay, so birds on a lake. Now I underexposed this by a stop, slapped my wrists. That's terrible. I'm still willing to show you though, because I'm not precious. And I was using the tracking AF. Intelligent tracking and autofocus, and it was set to eye focus. Now, because I've shot it slightly dark and I've then brightened it up a little bit in post, any noise that you see is going to be a bit more visible. Top tip, you want to minimize noise in an image, you shoot brighter and then darken later, because that way you maximize your signal to noise ratio. So here you go. Here is a 100 to 400mm lens at 400mm. Yep. 1/250th of a second, okay, so 250th of a second, and for a 400mm lens with moving birds, that's not bad. It's certainly sharp from a focus perspective. Let me zoom in a little bit, give you a clearer view. It's pretty sharp from a focus perspective. You can count those feathers, and this is also giving you the advantage to see a little bit of image noise in there as well. As I say, that's partly down to my fault getting it wrong at the point of shooting. But it's sharp, and it picked up the eye and it focused, and you can even see the reflection in the eye here. See that little bit of a catch light, and if you look in great detail, you can see the sky in there too. So there's your birds on the lake. Let me now give you, the next shout was for low light. Let me find you a low light picture. How about this one here? Now, well, I say low light. Do you mean low light or high ISO? I'll give you high ISO. Here we go. So this is ISO 3200 because I wanted to try and achieve the fast enough shutter speed to freeze this lunatic dog from running around. That was 4,000th of a second, incidentally. Now, yeah, there's a little bit of a blown highlight here on the back of his leg where he's caught the sun, and in an ideal world, I'd have loved his head to be in that sunbeam, but he was a bit too tall. So what you really want to see is what this looks like in terms of its noise performance. So let me zoom in to 100%. You also get the advantage of seeing how this has performed from a focus perspective. So just give that a second. There we go. Right. I don't know what you think in terms of noise performance, but for 3200, that's pretty clean. Am I using RF lenses? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So the lenses that I have that are RF, I've got the 24105 RF, the 51.2 and the 35. This 100 to 400 is not the new 100 to 400. This is an EF Mark II. So I guess it's a good point to remind you can use your EF lenses. And in fact, they perform incredibly well. In fact, I think they perform better on the R series than they do on DSLRs because of the extra communication pins. If you take off an R lens and look at it compared to an EF lens, there is more communication between camera and lens. So you get better communication, you get faster focusing. They just seem to be better. They seem to be sharper. And I've thought that since the R, in fact, not just on the R5. This is the EF 100-400. We can see that Otis loves to have sleep in his eye. He's always got sleep in his eye. That's pretty sharp. And in terms of noise, I don't know, let's find you, well, I'll tell you what, let's find you a shadow area, because if you're going to see noise, shadow areas like here is where you're going to see it. Maybe this bit of his harness here. I don't know. Hit up the comments. What do you think? What's that noise look like to you for 3200 ISO? Yes, you can see there's a little bit of a blocked shadow there as well. I don't know. What do you think, guys? It's up to you. You know, noise is incredibly subjective. What one person thinks is too much noise, another person thinks is not a problem at all. For me, I'd happily shoot this at 3200 ISO all day long. It wouldn't worry me. I think if you treat the file properly, i.e. you do what I said before, you shoot brighter and darken later, you are going to not have an issue with noise, probably even at 6400 ISO. But it is subjective, and you need to decide what works best for you. Okay, let's pop back out again. Right, and we'll come out to the full image. And what I'll do, you kind of saw a little bit of the focusing. Not bad, dude. Thank you. Is that my dog? He's not bad. He's a pretty cool dude, is my dog. Okay, let's find you. How about this sequence of 4? So here's, Greg asked for sports photography. So here is a sequence of 4 images of Otis running towards the camera. Now, as you know, if you've ever tried to focus on a moving subject, and I apologise, I know we said we were talking landscapes, but you've asked. I'm nothing if not amenable. I'd like to show you all sorts of things. So if you're focusing on something that's running towards the camera, that is pretty much the hardest thing for a camera to focus on, because the changing subject distance is greatest. Now, when it's a dog that runs like a lunatic, and actually, while he's not at full speed yet, he's the 3rd fastest dog breed in the world. For those of you that don't know your breed, he's a Hungarian Vizsla. It makes a pretty good test for the AF system, particularly when the light is not amazing. You know, this is at ISO 1600. We're at 2500th of a second. And in fact, it's a good point for me to say, one thing to remember when you're shooting action on a camera like the R5, when you've got all of that resolution, one thing to remember is that you are probably going to have to take the shutter speed higher than you thought you needed to. Steve Keen, cha-cha-cha. You said you've got to go. This is available to watch afterwards, so if you don't want to miss anything, you can watch again later when you come back, or tomorrow, or whenever you're feeling like you need to be put to sleep and hot milk isn't working for you, you need something soporific. This will be here on Facebook for you to catch up with later. Right, Mark Hurst, to compare what was the ISO on the geese. The ISO on the geese, I will tell you in a moment. Let me get through this first. So here is Otis lolloping his way towards the camera like a loon. 4 images in low speed continuous shooting and ISO 1600. Image noise wise, it looks pretty clean. Look at the focus. It's pretty much bang on. Let's go to the next one and I will scroll up. There we go. We've got the eyes again. So I was using the animal tracking IAF and indeed it picked it up. It's also, I've tried this on birds as well. It picks up a bird's eye in flight, which is frankly remarkable. It's almost disconcerting when it does it because you're not expecting it to be able to, and it does. So that's image number 3. And then here we go. Come on then, image number 4. In theory, this is the last one in the sequence, so it should be even harder because he's now much closer to the camera. And yet again, 4 shots in a row in low speed continuous shooting, and it's nailed the focus time and again. So I think it was Greg that asked that question. Greg said sports photography. I don't know if this answers your sports photography question, but hopefully it gives you an idea of what that autofocus is capable of. Right, the question was, for comparison, the ISO birds on the lake was 640. And I guess you're asking that because you saw what the noise was like. And compared to 3200, it goes to prove my point that if you shoot it darker and then brighten it up, you get more image noise, because this image appears to have, wait for it to process in, but this still appears to have a little bit more image noise in it than the image shot at 3200. And that is entirely down to my fault of getting the exposure wrong. Slap wrists again. And then having to brighten it afterwards, thereby giving more noise into the image. Okay. Right, let's come back out of here. And okay, at this point, what I'm going to do, I'm going to move a screen back. Now I'm going to grab a camera so that the camera doesn't shout at me. I'm even going to put a memory card in it like this. I'm going to turn the camera on, and I am going to show you some camera menus. Now, there's a variety of things for us to talk about right now, all sorts of things. I want to give you a quick run through of the menus. Hello. I'll come back into this top corner again. I would also, I want to show you menus. I want to give you some example setups to tell you a few different things, and hopefully maybe answer any questions that you've got about the menus. This should give you a good start point. If you've got a camera on pre-order, if you know you're going to get one, this is a bit like having the manual without having to read the manual. Okay, I'm not going to go through everything. I've got to leave some for a few weeks' time, but for now, I will. First thing to say, look at the battery in the top corner. Now, I've used this battery quite a bit. What is the battery life like? It's something that people desperately want to know. And in my experience, I think the battery life is about the same as the EOS R was. Now, we do have a new battery. We've got the LPE6NH, which is a hell of a mouthful, numbers and letters. Basically, it's higher capacity. So instead of 1,865 milliamp hours, it's 2,350 milliamp hours, I think. It doesn't mean that your battery life is any longer, but it means your battery life is no shorter. And that's crucial because the camera is actually doing more processing, more advanced processing, dealing with more data, and has the more advanced autofocus, which draws more power, and it's also got the in-body stabilization, which draws more power. So not losing any battery life is great. It means that it works really nicely. Now, if we go into the menus, let's go back to the start. Okay, so the menus, the great thing about Canon cameras is that they all look much the same. The menus all look very similar. A question just popped in since I was talking batteries. Right. Dave Amber says, battery life versus a DSLR. Which DSLR? If we're talking 1DX Mark III, the battery life on an EOS R5 will be destroyed by a 1DX Mark III, but the battery's 3 times the size. If we're talking a 5D Mark IV, I think the battery life on the R series is not quite as good as the battery life on a 5D Mark IV. But you've got to remember there's more electronics. So you've got an electronic viewfinder as well. So whatever you're doing, you know, on a 5D Mark IV, you can shoot using very limited electricity, power, whatever, battery life, because you can get away with very few electronics. But with a mirrorless camera, you've always got an EVF or a screen. So there's always a larger power draw somewhere in the system. So that's something to be very aware of. So that's that. Now, I don't know if that answered your question, Dave, or not. As I say, I think it's probably not as good as a 5D Mark IV, but you know, it swings and roundabouts. And there are grips available. So you could put a dual battery grip on here. My EOS R, which I'm looking for, I've put away somewhere. My EOS R always had a dual battery grip on it. And that, you know, that I never had a problem with battery life for that. Having mentioned the viewfinder, probably one of my favorite things about the R5, the viewfinder is so good. The resolution of the viewfinder is so nice. I didn't notice any tearing or any lag or delay when photographing things like Otis, subjects like Otis, obviously moving very quickly. I had no problems with that at all. And it's just so beautifully clear that it's a joy to use. Now, excuse me one moment, there's a door banging behind me and I'm just going to wedge something in the way of it. I'm sure you were all aware of it and you were all too polite to say anything. There we go, job done. Oh, camera's gone to sleep, wake up. So that viewfinder is something beautiful, and I'd urge you, you know, when you get the chance, go into store when they've got one in there and just have a look in the viewfinder, see what it looks like. Anyway, on to the menus. The menus look very much the same as all Canon cameras, so you can navigate your way around them clearly. Now we've got a new dial. We've lost the multi-function bar on the back, which was one of those things that some people loved and some people hated. I never used it for shooting, but I did use it for image review, and I used it in video. Top tip for those of you using an R for video, did you know that there was an option to set the multi-function bar on the back of the camera to adjust your aperture in 1/8 stop increments? Possibly not. You get the same option on the R5 as well, in one of the custom functions for one of the controls, and I will do my best to remember exactly where that is and show you in a minute. So we've got the red menus, and the red menus are all about shooting. So here are our HDR PQ settings. So if you go HDR PQ, you turn this on, you'll notice that we've got some view assists. So there's view assist while shooting and view assist in playback, and you can choose between either the midtones or the highlights to get a view that suits the scene that you're trying to shoot. What you'll notice is you turn this on and it does recommend that we then also turn on highlight tone priority to the D+ setting, not D+2, but that's going to give a bit more dynamic range into those highlight areas, smooth out the tonal range in the highlight areas, and hopefully you're going to get that expanded dynamic range that you were looking for. So let me turn that one back off again. I just wanted to show you where it was. What else have we got? We've got the anti-flicker shooting. We've got, here's a new one. We've got clarity. Now clarity gives you, it's a slider, it's a bit like clarity in Lightroom. It tries to improve the, I'm trying to come up with another word to clarity, because describing something using the word you're trying to describe is really bad form. Micro contrast, let's call it micro contrast, but it tries to do it in the background. So it tries to do it without adjusting the subject too much. So it's something that's worth playing with. We've also got, I didn't talk about it, but dual pixel RAW, as we've had for a few generations of Canon cameras. Classic, standard, long exposure noise reduction, that kind of stuff. Here is our other HDR mode. So this is the HDR mode that we've had in Canon cameras for a while. You can go with either option. Personally, I think that the HEIF format is going to be better. But if you're used to this one, if you like the way it works, then you've still got that again. You've got, you know, your various methods of adjusting the HDR look. So natural and then the 4 arts. Please, if you're going to do this, this one's okay. This one's marginally less okay. This one's not really okay at all, and this one makes me want to rip my eyes out with a rusty spoon. So, I mean, your mileage may vary, right? It's totally personal, entirely subjective. But if you've got a Canon camera that has an HDR mode, turn it to art embossed, set it to 3 stops of adjustment, and go photograph a waterfall. Tell me how you get on. It's an interesting effect. We'll call it that, interesting. Okay, so there's HDR. There's also this focus bracketing. So from a landscape perspective, possibly even a macro perspective, if you want to do stacked images, so focus stacking, you can bracket your focus and it will recommend creating a new folder, which is a good idea because it puts all the images together. And then you can choose the number of shots that you want in your bracket and choose your focus increment. So you can have very fine increments or very wide increments. And if you want to smooth the exposure, it might be worth turning that on as well. And then you can create a bracketed sequence of images that, in terms of focus, that you can stack together to create that expanded focus through your scene. So again, something new to the camera that you may want to play with. Stephen, did I use bracketing on any of my images? I actually didn't, because I don't know, maybe I'm a Luddite. I want to do some macro work with it and see how it works for that. But for landscapes, I just like good old-fashioned focus distance and aperture control. I've never felt the need to focus bracket my images to try and get everything in focus. I've always found that good understanding of aperture and focus distance has done enough for me. But it is something that I am going to have a play with because it's there. It would be silly not to. And you never know, give me a couple of months, I may well be focus bracketing all of my landscapes from here on out. Who knows? I suspect fundamentally I won't, because I'm lazy when it comes to sitting on the computer. I probably won't bother stacking them all together, but I may just give it a go. What else have we got? We have an interval timer. Very useful. There's a time-lapse movie function in the movie mode, which I probably won't show you today, but there's also, if you want to do time-lapse stills, you've got your interval timer as well, and there's also the bulb mode. And then here we get our shutter mode. So you've got mechanical, electronic first curtain, and electronic second or electronic full shutter. So mechanical gives us 12 frames a second, electronic first curtain gives us up to 12 frames a second, and the full electronic gives us 20 frames a second, but it is 20 frames a second. It's you can't get somewhere in between. You're not going to get 15 frames a second. You'll get 1 frame a second, or you'll get 20 frames a second, and nothing in between. Now, why would you use electronic shutter? One, it makes the camera very quiet, which is lovely. Two, you get that faster frame rate. For me, I think the camera's really quiet anyway, even in mechanical shutter. In fact, I've set it to mechanical. Hang on, I'm going to shut up and take a picture. That was me. If you wonder why I was leaning in, I was trying to put the microphone fairly close to the camera. I don't know if you could hear that. That's the camera sitting on a wooden table and taking a picture in mechanical. It's really quiet anyway. If I just give you the example now, here's electronic, and I've taken a picture. Very much more quiet. Okay. I don't necessarily think that I'll use electronic very often, but it's nice to have it for those of you that shoot weddings, perhaps, where you want to be very quiet. I could see it being a great benefit to you. Okay, let's go into back into the menu. Now, this should be something any Canon camera you get, set this to disable. Should be pretty much the first thing you do when you take a camera out of the box. Otherwise, you can merrily take pictures without a card in the camera, which is less than ideal. What else have we got? Most of this should be familiar. There's nothing particularly interesting in here. There is Viewfinder display format, so we can choose what that looks like. I tend to leave it on normal, and there's also a display performance. So I have tried both on the R. I tended to find smooth was better. We mentioned battery saving, and there is this power saving option here. I didn't actually talk about this before, but one of the things about the R5 that I found over the R, something I really like, is that the camera starts up quicker. Now, the R wasn't slow to start off. You turn the camera off, you turn it back on, half a second, maybe 3/4 of a second to a second, the camera was ready to shoot. But occasionally, that lag annoyed me, or that little bit of startup time annoyed me. The R5 is much quicker. It's less than half a second. So in terms of battery management, something you can do, you can shoot, and then you can turn the camera off. And it doesn't really matter, because you can flick the camera back on, and by the time you've taken the camera from here to your eye, it's ready to shoot. You're not going to end up missing shots. So if you want to maximize your battery life, just remember that startup time is so quick that you can start and stop the camera very, very quickly. Now, autofocus, we've got our lovely purple menu, or pink menu, whatever you might call it, of autofocus. There's a lot of settings in here. The ones that I really want to show you are in menu 3, because this is where we choose our servo AF performance, and we've got the case studies back. If you're a 5D Mark IV user, 5D Mark III, 7D Mark II, 1DX Mark II, 1DX Mark III, crikey, there are quite a few more. We've had case studies. Now, they've been cut down to 4 because Canon realized that people didn't use all 6. And this is how you can tailor the AF performance of the camera to suit what you're shooting. So you've got your 4 options, but they are also adjustable as well. So you can also come back here. There we go. You can also change what they look like in the sense of the tracking sensitivity and acceleration, deceleration tracking. Okay, so you can go in and customize them to specifically suit what it is you're going to shoot. So, for example, Otis appearing from behind a rock, case study 3, because he's not in frame. I want the camera to focus the moment he appears from behind that rock. Otis running in and out between the trees, case study 2, because I don't want the camera to be confused and focus on the tree as he runs behind a tree. I want it to wait until he reappears from behind that tree and stay locked on him, for example. Okay, so that's our AF settings. There's a few more in here. Oh, there's this one as well. Now we do have, I'm going to show you this. We do have the joystick back on the back of the camera right here, our multi-controller, which we can use for selecting our AF points directly. I love to touch and drag AF on the screen here, but I'm so happy that we've got this back as well. It makes life so much quicker and easier. And what you've got, if I come in here, is an ability to adjust the sensitivity a little bit to make it scroll faster or slower, depending on how much fine motor control you have of your thumb. So that's really nice. I've not found a need to move it yet. With so many AF points, it's the sort of thing that could be really frustrating if you had to click across all the time, but you don't. It actually scrolls very nicely, and that's what you're changing, is the speed of that scroll. If you're on RF lenses as well, you can adjust the sensitivity of the manual focus ring, so it can be finer or coarser in terms of its adjustment. We're going to skip through the blue menu and the actually purple menu, because they're playback and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. The camera does have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi in. There is a Wi-Fi accessory if you need more powerful Wi-Fi, but I think for most people, you're probably going to cope just fine with the Wi-Fi that's built into the camera. We've got our yellow menus. Most of this is familiar. There is this one from a video perspective. We can enable rotation info, so you can shoot vertical video if you want, if you're shooting specifically for, say, Instagram or for mobile consumption. And then there's this one. So screen brightness we've had for a while. Okay, that's great. But we now also have viewfinder brightness too. So 5 levels of viewfinder brightness, and you can adjust it to suit the environment in which you're shooting. And I recommend you do it in the same way that I recommend you adjust the screen brightness, whether you're in a bright environment or a dark environment. Adjusting the viewfinder brightness just gives you an even better experience when you are indeed shooting through the viewfinder. And we can also choose what we see in here. So you can switch between the screen and the viewfinder either with the auto, or you can manually flick between them. And we can also choose what we see in the screen as well, in the viewfinder or indeed on the rear screen. So that's some setup bits. And then let's go in here. So there is 1 and 2, nothing super exciting. 3 is where it gets super interesting, because we've got the customized buttons and the customized dials. So from an ergonomic perspective, I'm going to show you the camera again. Here we go. So we have got our main dial. We've got our shoulder dial. We've also got, for you 5D, 7D users, oh, you see all the boxes hidden behind, we've got a rear quick command dial as well. And obviously, being an RF camera, if you've got an RF lens, you have also got your control ring here. Or if you're using an EF lens, you've got the control ring adapter. So you can configure exactly how these work. So let me show you that. So we'll deal with the dials first. Now, to begin with, I tried setting this up differently to how I was used to. That was stupid, because I have a muscle memory of shutter speed on the front dial, aperture on the shoulder dial, and ISO on the control ring on the RF lenses. And I thought I'd switch it over, and I was going to put ISO here on the rear command dial, and it didn't work for me at all. So I've gone back to what I'm used to doing, and I have now got that dial on the back to switch between my AF point selection methods. So I can use it for AF point selection, or I can use it for selecting AF methods. So let me show you the two of them if I can. So if we come here, let me pick a focus point. So I can use that dial for going right and left. Okay, that works quite nicely. But what actually I think is even better is if we go down here and we choose this one, we can now cycle through the AF modes really quickly. Now, if you think you're never going to use some of these, you can turn them off, which makes it even faster to pick the one that you want. That is a really, really useful customization tool that just speeds up. So you go face tracking, spot, single point, AF point expansion 1, 2, zone, vertical zone, and horizontal zone. And I think that that is probably going to be the way that I'm going to work. I will keep tweaking this to find exactly what works perfectly for me, but this right now feels like a really good setup. We've also got in the customized buttons so many options. So, you know, you've got the ability to switch between stills and video, and the buttons do different things. I'd recommend they don't do too many different things because that does get confusing. For example, I use the MFN button here to switch between viewfinder and screen, which I quite like. Other than that, I would normally have this turned on as well. So that's how I select my focus points. So that's that multi-controller to the right of the viewfinder, just next to the AF on button. So I can now use the dial on the back to move between the modes of AF, and then use that joystick to move between the points themselves. What else is there? I guess that's pretty much it. I mean, there's some other stuff in here, quite a bit of other stuff in here, but for now, I think I've shown you the most important things as I consider them. Have there been any more questions that I've missed? Anything else? No, not yet. Okay, well, what I'm going to do is I am going to come back to my screen here. I'm going to show you, I don't know, let's find you one more image. Oh, this is what I wanted to show you. Here we go. Right. Let me show you this. So here we go. Wakey wakey. Edit image window. I'm going to fire this up. Now this is a bumblebee. And I'm going to leave you with this as a how good do you think the autofocus is. One great thing with the AF system is that you're not just, if you go into object tracking, you're not just relying on the camera picking up the object, but you can select where it starts from. I didn't show you that in the menu, but there's an option for you to select. It can either be you use the joystick and you just move the square around. In fact, Dave, I can show you, so why don't I just show you? Here we go. So I am in, let's have a look. I'm in face tracking, right? Now, if I, let me just make sure that this is configured correctly to initial point. So this is our initial servo AF point for face tracking. So you can either have it auto, where the camera decides. I don't overly recommend that. I think this one actually is probably going to be the most useful. So you select a point. So we come out here and I can then move the AF. Did I even select that? I did, okay. So I can then move the AF point around to choose exactly where it's going to focus. And that's what I did for this. So this is the bumblebee. I selected my AF point. I put it not in the middle, but just off to one side. And it meant that when the bee arrived, I could pick a point to put on the bee. So it actually shortened the acquisition time for the subject and made it easier for the camera to track. So this is a bee in flight at 1/2500th of a second. Let me give you a 100% view. We can see the blur in the wing beats, but I would challenge anyone to tell me that that is not sharp on that bee's bottom, or indeed its head, actually. That's quite how good the AF system on this camera is. Let me come back again, hello. That's quite how good the AF system is. It picked up this bee, it tracked the bee around as it was flying, and it followed it in and out of the flowers. So there we go, that's what I wanted to leave you with. I'm going to come back here now. I'm going to say we've overrun by 3 minutes. Very sorry about that. I hope I haven't interrupted your dinner. I hope you've enjoyed this session. As I say, I will be back in a couple of weeks' time talking about the R5 more around portraits. I've had one portrait shoot. I've got another couple coming up. So I will be talking more about portraits and how the R5's performed for that. So I guess we'll be talking, well, hand holding, so probably some of the image stabilization stuff. Obviously the eye tracking AF from a portrait perspective. Maybe some picture styles. I don't know. There'll be a variety of things. And if you've got anything that you would like me to test out to then show you, hit up the comments down below. You know where they are. And tell me, and I will do my best to test them in the next couple of weeks so that when I come back, it will again be 6:30 on a Tuesday. And it's not next Tuesday, but I'm pretty sure it's the Tuesday after that. I'm sure Camera World will correct me if I'm wrong. Then I will do my best to show you those then. In the meantime, thank you so much, all of you, for joining in, for asking questions, for sitting here, giving up your Tuesday evening to sit and listen to me ramble on about a camera that I'm incredibly excited about and absolutely don't want to give back. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting, maybe a bit educational, and possibly even entertaining. I'd like to be entertaining. Maybe educational. I don't know. It's a balance, right? Anyway, thanks everyone. I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. And I'd recommend, if you want one of these cameras, you get your pre-orders in super quickly to Camera World. I know the pre-order list is huge. The sooner you get on that list, the sooner you're going to get yourself a camera. That's all from me for tonight, everyone. Stay safe and well. Keep shooting. Get out there, take pictures with whatever camera you've got right now. And I shall see you all for the next one. Bye-bye for now.